So there's another option for blending. It's called using chemical blenders. There are some you can buy on the market, but for the purpose of this demo, I'm doing ones I think you might have access to in your own house. So I've done just a quick little shade with a light pressure over all these different areas, and we're going to try a couple different things. So there's mineral spirits, nail polish remover, rubbing alcohol, and then I've got a colorless blender marker here, and a couple paint brushes I'm going to use to do it. So essentially how a chemical blender works is it disrupts the binder that's holding the wax that's holding the pigment together in the colored pencils. So for this first one, I'm going to use a colorless blending pencil just so we can kind of compare with something we've seen before. So using a scrubbing motion, making little circles, reactivating all of the wax underneath with this top one. You can see it's making the colors a little more vibrant. It's helping remove some of the texture, but the issue is, like with all burnishing, that it also kind of flattens everything out. It makes it harder to go over later, which we'll look at. And sometimes it can leave a bit of its own texture. You can get kind of little chunks of buildup of the wax, so that's one of the things that you kind of have to look for when you're using these. And then to the left of that, we're going to leave this one blank, so it'll be just like a control, so we can compare it as we go around. So next I'm going to try the colorless blender marker. The reason this works is that they pretty much just have rubbing alcohol in them. Once again, going from light to dark, using a pretty light touch with it, but a bit of a circular scrubbing motion to disrupt the texture of the strokes of the brush, not brush strokes, pencil strokes. You can see though that it's left a little bit of blue on the end of my marker tip, but it doesn't seem to come off. The only nail polish remover I have is green. When using any of these chemicals as we go forward, I want you to only use a small amount and try to cap or close off the rest of it so you can work quickly. Just a little bit will do. You also don't want to soak the paper because it'll bubble up the way it did in watercolor, so we're going fast. I'm dabbing off as much excess as possible and then using a circular motion to sort of scrub the paper in. You can tell it's leaving a bit of a green tinge. The acetone in particular does pick up a lot of the tone, so it's actually lightening that section. So next one we're going to try, use these all in a super well ventilated area if you're going to do this, is rubbing alcohol. So just a little bit. I like to use it in the cap because it does deposit color sometimes. If you get too much liquid, like I said, it bubbles up. So you want to dab it off on something or brush it on the side of the cap. But you can see it's sort of activating things, it's rubbing them around. It's not doing an outstanding job, but it does help blend some of the texture out. And without picking up as much as the nail polish remover did. I got some like white spots in the paper where the nail polish remover accidentally like erased out the pigment. So the last one is OMS, or odorless mineral spirits. These are what a lot of colored pencil artists use. They're ones you can buy. They're specifically made for colored pencil work, colored pencil blenders. They're all essentially an odorless mineral spirit. Thing about them is that they have an oily kind of texture, so you don't want to set them too close to your paper anywhere you don't want to see that. Like on a blank white piece, you can see there's a little dot of it. So once again, starting in the light, sort of using a circular, a little bit of a scrubbing motion, a stiffer brush, one of your more like an acrylic brush than a watercolor brush. You will ruin your watercolor brushes. And getting the waxes reactivated, getting them to sort of mush around, blend out all of those texture lines. So now that I've got all of these like this, we're going to let them dry all the way. And then we're going to come back and look at how we can layer over them. So you can see from here that there's a pretty significant change. So they're dried now. The odorless mineral spirits is the one I'm going over right now. The nice thing about using a chemical blender, it does not affect the tooth of the paper at all. So you can see I'm able to layer over it with a pretty good amount of saturation, and it's already taken a lot of the white out of the paper, so it's like working over a watercolor wash almost, but the texture is still there. Versus over here, I'm going over the burnish section of the paper, and it's just not getting that saturation because it's already flat in the tooth of the paper. It's very waxy. So on any of these that are more of a chemical base, you'll be able to go back over them with a light pressure and still apply a lot of color. It's harder to go over a burnished area. But as you can see, the odorless mineral spirits are the ones that work the absolute best if you have something like that in your house. It's pretty much paint thinner. People use them for oil painting. You might have them around. You might be able to get them if you're interested in trying them. A lot of the burnishing techniques will get you there the same way. It's just that you might have to plan ahead for when you do that final burnishing stage, because it is harder to get that nice vibrant saturation on top of it. Then you can see the section that is the control does have the same amount of saturation, it just has a slightly bit more texture to it. So you can go back over these chemical areas and do a second round. If you go back with a solvent, any of these, you want to go with a lighter amount. So if you're using the alcohol, the nail polish, or the OMS, you want to make sure that now you're using a very minimal amount of the spirit. So each time you go back, you use less. So that's pretty much the basis for those if you'd like to do a little bit of practice with them. Hopefully that helps. If you have any questions about them, please contact me. But as you can see, the OMS works really well, the rubbing alcohol works really well, and good luck.